It is now my honor to introduce our guest speaker today. Reverend Sally Robbins has been a minister for over 20 years and has been the senior minister at 3 churches in Maryland and in Arizona. She currently lives in Asheville, North Carolina. Reverend Sally came to the ministry after over 25 years in the corporate and entrepreneurial worlds. Her background includes extensive experience in sales and marketing, television and radio advertising, and event production. Reverend Sally is a contributing writer to Science of Mind magazine and has also served at the national level at the Centers for Spiritual Living in a variety of roles, including 3 times being named co-chair of the CSL Event Committee. Please join me this morning in welcoming Reverend Sally Robbins.
Good morning, CLF. Oh, I can't tell you how excited I am to be here with you today. It has been 2.5 years since I left Arizona, and I miss you dearly. I cannot wait to come back and visit you. But for now, we get to Zoom together. How exciting is that? Thank you, Dr. Sherry, for inviting me to be a part of the service today. And my topic today is the art of awakening. Because I think that there are many of us who are getting the glimmers that maybe there's something pulling us forward into a shift in consciousness and awakening and awareness. And so I'd like to focus on that today. I'm going to share my screen so that I can show you some of the ideas that I have around this, because isn't awakening what we're all here to do? We're all here to understand that life is always an evolving force, an evolving force. Dr. Ernest Holmes called it the upward spiral, that we're always in that place of a deepening, and we can choose whether or not to listen to that call. We can choose whether or not to evolve in that upward spiral. But those of us who are here, those of us who are a part of CLF and all the guests that might be watching, we understand that this is a pivotal time on our planet and that we are being called to a greater mission to not only serve our local community, but to the greater planet as well. So I want to start by showing you a wonderful quote. And it says, our opportunities for awakening are cleverly disguised as crisis, as discomfort, and even pain. Would you agree? Can I get an amen to that? We are absolutely in a space where the whirlwind, the tumultuous activity that is going on in our world, the chaos that is happening in our world is a call. It's a cry for leadership, for spiritual leadership especially. And that's when we, if you've forgotten that you are a master, I'm going to remind you of that today. You are a master spiritual being, and that you are being called to something that is pushing you to that higher vibration, that higher frequency, that higher level of existence. It is so easy to talk about the principles that we espouse, is it not? It is so easy to say scripture and verse of what our new thought tenets are, and yet that is just the surface. We are absolutely being demanded to live these principles, and if we're not, we are missing the very juice of why we are here. So perhaps I'd like you to think about this. Perhaps what is going on in the world, which is rather scary sometimes, divisive, all of those things that we watch the news and go, what is happening to our world? But I'd like you to consider perhaps that this is promoting our awakening. All of these activities are actually demanding that we come to that new level of awareness. Challenge is what motivates us to stay in this game. I love what Tama Keeves had to say about this. She says, you need an extraordinary experience to unlock your extraordinary mind. That's the power of leaving behind your familiar life and distractions. That is a very accurate description of what is happening in 2020, where we are actually having to leave behind an old life. We're having to pivot to create a new life, and change is always scary and threatening even sometimes. And yet that's where the caterpillar is being called into becoming into being a butterfly. And so, as Tama says, we need an extraordinary experience to unlock our extraordinary mind. So these times of crisis and disarray, and they're actually opportunity. They're actually the calling for us to move into that higher level of spiritual knowingness, spiritual living. And with at CLF here in the New Thought community, talk is cheap. Are we modeling these very principles with which we speak of? So you and I are on a precipice, on our growing edge, and I love being on my growing edge. I think I signed up for an accelerated life. I think many of you did too. That we said, okay, we'll come back and we will understand that as we are in the midst of whatever is going on in our world, that we're coming forth to be a beacon of light. We are coming forth to be a person of power and authority and kindness and love in the midst, even when we cannot see that around us. That's what we're going to choose to be. So I want to tell you about a man who really embodied that. He lived back in the last century, and his name was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. This is a picture of him. He was born in 1906, and he became a Lutheran minister. He lived in Germany. He actually came from a very learned family. His father was a very well-known psychologist and was a teacher at one of the local universities. And he grew up in a very educated way, and he decided that he was going to become a minister and got his teaching there in Germany, but then actually left and went to America, went to New York City, as a matter of fact, where he was studying at a college there at Union. And so as he was studying, a friend of his in his class invited him to go to a church in Harlem. So he went to this church in Harlem that was all African Americans, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer had never been at anything like this, and he saw people singing gospel songs and just really getting passionate as even the sermon was being delivered, and he was just amazed at how people were living the philosophy that they were talking about, that they were really getting into it. He was forever changed by that, and he loved going to that church the entire time he was in New York. So he went back to Germany, and unfortunately, the Third Reich had come into power. And talk about disarray, talk about crisis. There were a lot of changes that were happening as Hitler came into power in Germany. And pretty soon it became very uncomfortable because Hitler decided that the state of the nation of Germany, now the churches would all fall under his domain. And so this was very disconcerting for ministers, because that now Hitler was the head of the church. That was the way it was presented. And Dietrich said, no, Christ is the head of our church. Spirit is the head of our church. And so he formed a group that was actually in opposition of the Third Reich, which was not a popular thing to do. And he suffered greatly for that, because things started happening where eventually he was thrown into prison for it. But going back a second, he started teaching, and he joined the German intelligence system. And I love this part of the story, because here is a man who is trained as a minister, and yet knows that his church is being changed in ways that he cannot be a proponent of. So he joins the German military intelligence, but he becomes a double agent. So he's a minister, but he's also a double agent, and he starts going to other countries under the guise of being this Lutheran minister, and was actually doing counterintelligence for the Allies. This took great courage. This was someone who definitely was standing up and standing in his power. He wrote a wonderful book called The Cost of Discipleship during that time, which is still available today, still widely read. And even though he has very traditional roots, from mainstream religion, it's a fabulous read about how we can't just talk about these ideas. We have to live them. And his way of awakening was embodying these principles day in and day out, no matter what danger that put his life in. He had to live this way. Eventually, the Germans said, no, you can't publish any books any longer, because it was too against what they thought. So he couldn't publish, and then they eventually threw him in prison. And unfortunately, within months of the Allies winning the war, he was put to death. But the legacy of Dietrich Bonhoeffer is this, that when you take a stand, you are saying, I am here to be a disciple of the Christ within me. I am here to take a stand for the spiritual nature of who I am, for the idea that I can embody power and kindness and compassion and grace, and that nothing and no thing can come between that, and nothing can separate me from my understanding of my God. And one of his best known quotes is, when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Now, he's not talking about dying in the physical sense there. He's talking about dying to our human sense, to our human self. And the Bible talks about this quite a bit, that we are here to renew our minds. That's the whole idea behind that. Think a new thought is what we would say in New Thought. What is that which is holding us back? What is that which is keeping us dormant and asleep? And what can awaken us is a new thought. It's dying to the old and living in the new. That takes tremendous courage and tremendous skill as we keep practicing these ideas. And what's that old saying? Practice makes perfect. Well, perfect practice makes perfect. When we keep doing it again and again and again, when things show up in our life and we have to show love to those who are unloving, when we have to show kindness to those who are not kind, when we have to forgive those who are, quote, unforgivable, have done unforgivable things in this world, that's the road that the master walks on. That's what a spiritual master is saying. I'm game on. I'm here to do that. I'm here to live these principles, even when there's no earthly reason for me to do so. There is a spiritual reason for me to be called to this higher level of expression. The art of awakening is saying yes to each and every principle without exception. There are no exceptions. We love all. We live for all. And we die to the old again and again and again, because that Christ, that spirit center within us, is always that changeless, that idea that says, you are my beloved. And if you are my beloved, so is everyone else. We have to know that. We have to know that there is something in the unseen working for our greater good each and every time we say, I'm here. Game on. It's time to move forward. See, awakening expands our possibility. It expands our thinking about who we are and what we're here to do. I'm reminded of that story in Second Kings, where the widow, her husband has just passed, and she's greatly in debt, and people are coming to take her sons as slaves to pay off the debts. She goes to Elisha, and Elisha tells her, do you have a pot in your home? Or what do you have in your home? And she said, well, I have a very small vial of oil. Oil in those days was very expensive and very valued. And she said, I have a very small vial of that. He said, do you have a pot in your home? She said, yes. And he said, tell your sons to go to every neighbor and ask them for whatever pot they can spare and bring that back into your home. She did as Elisha told her. And they bring back all of these pots. And as they do so, he has also commanded her, take your vial of oil and start pouring it. She pours it into the first pot. It fills up. Surprisingly, she didn't think that a little small vial of oil would do it. She pours it into the second pot. And she finds out, yes, that too is being filled now. Third pot, fourth pot. Pretty soon, every pot that her sons had brought back were now filled to the rim. And Elisha had said to her, once that happens, take that oil and sell it and pay off of your debts, which is what she did. And her sons were not in harm's way. Now, we know that the metaphysical reasoning behind this is the law of expectation. When you are developing your art of awakening, you are expecting nothing but good. We don't get what we want. We get what we expect. And so her expectation was, I'm going to fill this vessel, and I have all these vessels to fill. That is the symbology that we are here to expand our thinking into a higher level of expectation, a higher level of saying, you know what? I'm not thinking big enough. I know that I have unlimited prosperity, love, kindness, all of the God qualities that are available to me are available in unlimited capacity. And yet, why do I just have this small pot? That's all I have. Why do I not expand my horizon to a greater good? And so the widow teaches us that all we need do is collect, all of the ideas that, yes, I expect good because I'm collecting more pots to put that in. I know that I too have the cattle on 1,000 hills, and that I can claim my divine birthright as a beloved, blessed being of God. There is nothing that we cannot do. And the art of awakening is saying yes to that higher level of expectation that God is with us, that as a co-creative force, the God within us is always supporting us. That is so easy to forget in times like this. That is so easy to go, well, that might be working over there, but this compartment of my life, boy, it's not working at all. That's where the rubber meets the road, my friends. That's where we have to say, I'm going to do my inner work until I can see that which I can know and know the truth about myself. Until I make that 18-inch journey down to my heart, it will absolutely come into fruition if I hold the high watch and never stray from the one. The art of awakening is a skill that we must continue developing throughout our entire lives. In my naivete, when I first got into spiritual growth, which was way back in my teens, I used to think someday I would get to a place where I could just rest on my laurels and I could just really reap the benefits of all the wisdom I had gained. It doesn't work like that, I found out. I found out that there are challenges, and what happens is the better challenges keep growing. And so if you're having the same problems you had 5 years ago, you might want to take a look at that. We're always going to have challenges and difficulties in our lives, but they're going to be new. They're going to be different. They're going to be pulling us pulling us upward if we are doing our work. That naivete of mine of thinking that I could rest on my laurels is not the way of a master. The master is always working to expand his or her thinking and consciousness and frequency and vibration for the good of all mankind. We move from I-centered to we-centered. We move from a place of it's all about me and my growth to I'm here to grow so that I can help this world grow itself. Does that make sense? That, again, is an awakening that happens within each one of us at some point. And as we grow to that place, all of a sudden we're now caring for the world. We're now caring for things that might not have been in our realm before. And that humanity, the growth of humanity, is first and foremost in our life. When we are going through these steps of awakening, we're finding that we are finding these difficulties are moving us into a place of, gee, I just don't know if I can do that. So when there was a wonderful, well, we all know Star Trek. Remember Star Trek? Back in the 60s, the original Star Trek. Well, the original Star Trek was with Captain James T. Kirk and Spock and Jim McCoy, the doctor. Well, when the creator, Gene Roddenberry of Star Trek, was going to start filming the television series, the original television series, they told him you only have a certain amount of budget. And he couldn't figure out how he was going to show the Enterprise landing on planets. It was going to be too costly for the technological aspect, which was still in its primitive stages, the special effects of landing the Enterprise onto a planet. And he couldn't figure out how to do that within the budget that he did. And finally, he came up with an idea. He said, what if I create this thing called a transporter? The transporter room will be where people beam up and beam down. And so this slide shows you how they created that special effect simply because there wasn't enough budget to do anything beyond that. What is that old phrase? Necessity is the mother of invention. So his lack of budget forced his creativity to come up with a whole new idea, which now seems very passé because we all know that whole idea of beam me up, Scotty. And so Gene Roddenberry had to tap into that infinite creative intelligence within him simply to find a way around a physical limitation of budget, and in doing so created a way that I'm sure somebody is working on this somewhere on the planet, how they can do it today, because everything else on Star Trek is pretty much coming about into reality. And so I know that the art of awakening is about us tapping into that creative, infinite intelligence that always has solution. Solution, as my friend David Alt says, solution already exists. If we simply allow and surrender, knowing that the problem, the difficulty is something we can let go. And because we know that we have to get to the level of solution rather than the level of problem. And before we can get there, we have to raise our consciousness and awaken to the idea, I know there's a solution here. I expect a solution to show up. That's where I want us as awakened beings to live. Ernest Holmes had this to say about it. The belief in a life apart from good is a dream from which we must awake. If we are to taste the waters of reality, that's reality with a capital R, for which flow from the source of life. This is but a dream if we are not fully participating. I know many people in my life who are sleepwalking through life. I, at times, have done that myself, where it's a lot easier just to disconnect and be unconscious. But you and I have said, no, I'm going to be a conscious being. I'm going to be someone who steps up and says, I'm here. I'm here to be in the game, not the stands watching. I'm here to play in the game. And as an awakened being, as a conscious being, that means I have responsibility for everything in my life. Everything. My thoughts, my deeds, my actions, my words, everything is my responsibility. My responsibility. An awakened being tries to live like the lotus. Thich Nhat Hanh said, "You cannot grow lotus flowers on marble. You have to grow them in the mud. Without mud, you cannot have a lotus flower." And I love how the lotus flower, when it's there, even if a speck of mud flicks up onto it, just someone's, something steps into the water, or a fish or something comes by, the lotus is so precious and so smooth, it rolls right off. The mud cannot stick to it. And in this way, the awakened part of us is changeless. Nothing can stick to it. Nothing can mar its beauty, its power, its passion. And so when we're like the lotus, we know that we can be in this world. And if the world's dirt and grime and all of that, the negativity of the world comes upon us, it won't stick. It won't stick. It will be like Teflon. It'll just fall right off, because we've done the work and we are so powerful in our vibration of positivity, of conscious awareness, that negativity doesn't stand a chance with us. The Buddha said this: as a blue or white lotus is born in the water, grows up, and is unpolluted by the water, so too has the perfected one, also could be called the awakened one, grown up in the world and has risen above the world and stands unpolluted by it. Unpolluted. And I don't know about you, but I would like to live an unpolluted life. I'd like to know that even if pollution of negativity comes my way, it just rolls on by. There is nothing that mars the beauty and the power of me as a spiritual stand for good. There is nothing that can knock me off center. Even if it does a little bit, I come right back. You know those clowns that used to punch and it would bounce right back? That's what I want to be. I want to be that kind of idea that no matter what punch comes my way, I bounce right back, because I am firmly convicted in the teachings of our spiritual world that says that I am love and kindness and compassion and beauty and power. And nothing moves me from that conviction at all. You and I can live like that as fully mature, awakened beings, consciously choosing how to live our lives day in and day out. The lotus actually takes the mud and takes nourishment from it. It grows right up out of the mud. And we can learn to live like this, that no matter what's going on around us, we can be like that lotus and take our nourishment from it, and from the deep source that knows that it is a lotus and nothing can change that. That's how I want to live, as an awakened, conscious, spiritual being. This is a time for waking up, my friends. This is a time for us to put aside whatever thoughts we have that we are here forever. The time is now. This is the only instant we have. The holy instant is here, right now. I'm reminded of a wonderful talk that I saw recently by Esther Hicks and Abraham. And for those of you that don't know, Abraham is the entity that comes through Esther Hicks. And I found this wonderful selection on YouTube, and I want to show you a part of this at this moment so that you can see what she is talking about: staying awake in that place that knows that we are here only to be a part of the one, and that our mission is critical right now. Our mission is so critical. So here is Esther Hicks talking about her experience with that as Abraham.
We like it when you get your back up against a wall sometimes, because that causes you to launch rockets, and it also causes you to focus. And what we mean by that, it causes you to do more deliberately what you came here to do. You are a powerful creator. You are pure, positive energy in a physical body. You are a creative genius. You are a brilliant creator. And not one of you said, well, I'll go forth into a physical existence. I'll go forth into a human body. But get it all cleaned up first. Get it all looking really good. Get all the bugs worked out. And when it is pleasing to me, then I'll come forth and I'll observe the things that are there then. Not one of you said that. Instead, you said, I'm eager to jump in because I know the variety and contrast will activate within me my personal preferences. So I get to be a personal, deliberate creator. And you also said, and I know that my inner being, the larger part of me, from whence I have come, will remain non-physically focused and will receive each and every desire that I launch and will hold steady those desires in a frequency of pure positive energy. So that any time I get in the vicinity of that, I will feel it, and I will feel the inspiration of it, and I will be guided. I will be called toward not just the end result, because the end result is what I'm looking for, but called along the journey to the end result that won't stay the end result, because there will be another and another and another and another. You will never get it done, and you cannot get it wrong. And the reason you can't get it wrong is because it's never done. Wherever you stand is causing you to launch new requests, which are being granted immediately by source and non-physical energy and your inner being. And so, whether you are deliberately meditating and deliberately quiet your mind, whether you are deliberately focusing, whether you are wanting to be a deliberate creator, still, everything is working as you knew it would. You knew that contrast would inspire new desire. And you knew that your inner being would get hold of that and become it. And you knew that in that happening, that the whole of you would have a stronger point of attraction. And you knew that the evolution of your species and all other species is based upon exactly that. You knew that the well-being would happen, whether you were consciously letting yourself be deliberately in on it or not. That's why you jumped in with such eagerness. And so we know that all is well, whether you get hold of these ideas and are able to deliberately apply them. But we want you to feel not just the ease of relief. We want you to feel the delicious satisfaction of being a hands in the clay, deliberate creator. Nothing is more exhilarating than for life to cause you to identify a desire and for you to recognize you're not in the vibrational frequency of that desire right now. You can feel you're off because you feel doubt. You have a desire, but you feel doubt. And maybe the doubt, usually in the beginning, is stronger than the desire. But because you know about this, and you know what doubt means, and you know what feeling better means, because you know what your emotions mean, because they are the indicator of what you're doing vibrationally and how you're closing the gap, and whether or not you are leaning in the direction of who you really are or leaning in the direction of who you were, which caused you to become more. When you are understanding that and feeling yourself not energized, that's not what we want you to feel. Feel yourself called. And trust, even before the evidence, that we've got you.
We've got you. We've got you. Trust that you are called. You are called. I love that we are all being called to a higher level of being. And that if we're alive on this planet, we have the capability within us to be fully conscious in everything that we do. And we impact everything and everyone on the planet by what we do. There is no higher calling than that, none. And our opportunities, going back to what I said originally, that we are absolutely being pulled into something new and exciting and fabulous, our opportunities for awakening are cleverly disguised as crisis, discomfort, and even pain. That gives me hope. That gives me hope that every time I start feeling that doubt that Esther was talking about, that I'm not in alignment with what I should be doing, then I know that I still have to hold to that idea that I am here to be a powerful spiritual being, mastering these principles, embodying these principles to the very best of my ability until I see the fruition of them. And if it takes years, it takes years. I'm here. I am called. And so are you. So are you. Rumi said this: hold on to the reins of love and don't be afraid. Hold on to the real behind the false and don't be afraid. You must know that the beloved you seek is none other than you. Hold on to this truth and don't be afraid. The beloved you are seeking is none other than you. There's not a white horse coming in to rescue. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And so if I take that stance, if I understand that stance, I know that I have to step up and live as that spiritual being that is the beloved, that is the co-creative force within me, creating this world day in and day out, practicing, mastering the principles that I hold dear, that I can be a light, a beacon, a shining light on the hill, and that all of those around me can then be tuned into the frequency that I am, which is source. It's cause. It's first cause. That's where I want to live. That's the great awakening. That's the story of the prodigal son that Rhonda read to us earlier. Coming back to the one, coming back to source, and staying with that. That's the key. That's the key. So, will you join me this week in waking up, in calling forth that master in you that is saying, game on, I'm ready. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. I'm ready to play. Because I invite you to feel called by God to this reckoning, this shift in consciousness, this quickening that is happening within us and thus within the world. You have been called. You have been qualified. You may not feel that way, but join me in thinking the possibility that you are called to something that is greater than that you can even imagine at this point. It's up to you if you answer that call. So I invite you, listen. What is calling you forth? What is calling to your greater sense of self, to that inner sense of self that knows you are here to do a mighty work? And with the law of expectation, like the widow had, you know that your expectation is, I am a master at what I am doing. I am a master at being the principles that I hold closest, that I value. I invite you to be and live as a master this week. Just surrender yourself this week and just live as a master would. It will change your life. I guarantee it. Let's take that into prayer. Oh, we've processed a lot this morning, so let's take a deep breath in and let it out. So this is what I know, that each one of us has ears to hear, eyes to see, that we are absolutely cracked open wide this morning. Our hearts are cracked open, our minds are cracked open, and a new thought has entered. A new awakening is now coming forth. A new idea is birthing right now. And so we listen, we observe, we know that God is on the scene, that God's got us, and that we absolutely can step into a whole new way of living as a master. And just as the great way showers have shown us, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, all of those great way showers in our past that we study, we know that we too are of that one mind. We too are called to a greater awakening of ourselves and of humanity. And so I just bless this time together this morning. I know that the awakening, the quickening, the shift is happening right now. For each and every person within the sound of my voice, I know that something is happening in the unseen for our greater good. And so I bless each and every individual who is answering that call and saying, yeah, I'm in the game too. I'm ready to play. I'm ready to step up and be that empowered master that I know that I already am. And so I simply let these words go. I know that as I've declared them in mind, the only place anything ever happens, it is done. It is done. And I can rest in the knowledge that God is on the scene and that God is in the midst of all of this that is happening in our world. And so we simply say, thank you, Spirit. Thank you, Spirit, for all that is and all that is yet to be. I let it be so. And together we say, and so it is.